Whatever we know about these terms, these English terms, we may find it different from whatever Sri Aurobindo explains it. That's why we should keep our mind open and blank so that the knowledge he pours into us will come to us in an uninterrupted flow. So here knowledge, normally whenever he speaks of knowledge, he talks about, he adds a word, he adds one more word to that word. He always calls it integral knowledge. And he says, what is integral knowledge? So let's find out what is integral knowledge as stated by Sri Aurobindo. See, this integral knowledge is something which is already there in the integral reality. It is something that is already there in the integral reality. We should know that it's not new. It's not a new or a non-existing thing that has to be created or acquired by us or learned by us or built up by us by our mind. So this one should be very clear. Integral knowledge is something that is already there in the integral reality, which is not something which should be acquired by us through our mind. This is number one. Number two, it must be rather discovered or uncovered. It is a truth which is self-revealed by our spiritual endeavor, because it's veiled in our deeper part of the self. So this is the second point. Again, he says integral knowledge is that which links the highest to the lowest through all the mediating terms and achieves an indivisible whole. See, what happens is that we see everything in parts. We are unable to link and have a holistic view. We only see the parts. We don't perceive anything as an indivisible whole. But the integral knowledge is that which links the highest to the lowest, the divine from the top to the matter in the bottom. It links everything. It links the one and the many, the unmanifest and the manifest. That is the integral knowledge. So Upanishads, Sri Aurobindo says, whatever here we discuss are the words of Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo is quoted from Upanishad. He says that Upanishad affirms the perfect and the liberating knowledge to be that which excludes neither the self nor its creation. So as per the Upanishad, the true knowledge is the one which excludes neither the self, the creator, the divine, nor its creations. So there is no exclusion here. Again, Sri Aurobindo makes a reference to the Rig Veda. Here, as per the Rig Veda, the knowledge appears to signify a consciousness of the truth, that is Satyam, the right, Rhythm, and of all that is the order of the truth and right. This is how the Rig Veda describes the knowledge. And the Rig Veda describes knowledge as a truth perceiving consciousness, Siddhi. Rig Veda describes the knowledge, integral knowledge, as a truth perceiving consciousness, as against a non-perceiving consciousness, which is called avidya, or which is called ignorance. This is a Vedic description. Again, at a later period, our Upanishads, Vedantic thought, they describe the knowledge as Vidya and ignorance as Avidya. So again, as per the Upanishads, Vidya meant knowledge in its highest spiritual sense. It meant the knowledge of the one. It is seeing oneness in multiplicity. It's not the knowledge of the one alone. It is seeing oneness in multiplicity. That is Vidya. Avidya means ignorance of oneness. If you fail to see the oneness in the multiplicity, that means we are living in avidya. It is a knowledge of the divided many. If you find in ignorance, what is lacking is that the unifying consciousness of one reality is lacking in avidya or ignorance. So this is how the definition of the knowledge. So this is different from what we know as knowledge. So one should be clear about the concept of knowledge as explained by Sri Aurobindo. Then we have intellectual knowledge, right? Whatever the knowledge as we know is only our intellectual knowledge, knowledge acquired by our mind through our senses. This is what we know as intellectual knowledge. And we have the integral knowledge of Sri Aurobindo as explained by Sri Aurobindo. What's the difference between these two? One should know the difference between these two. Then only we can proceed as to what is this integral knowledge. See, what Sri Aurobindo says is that the intellectual knowledge can be learned and completed in our present mode of consciousness. So one should be very, again, I'm repeating his definition. It's a beautiful definition he makes. It's a very novel. Whatever Sri Aurobindo says, no one has spoken on these terms before. Very novel way of approaching this subject of knowledge. He says, intellectual knowledge can be learned and completed in our present mode of consciousness. That means what? Our consciousness can remain the same, yet we acquire the knowledge. There is no change in consciousness. There is no change in the mold of our consciousness. It remains the same. This is what that makes a difference between a philosopher and a yogi. You see, there are very, very, very many great philosophers in the world history, and you can't compare any one of them with Sri Aurobindo. Many people make a mistake of calling Sri Aurobindo a philosopher. We are restricting it because philosopher is a term which is a very restrictive term. Whereas Sri Aurobindo transcends beyond all this definition. He transcends beyond the term philosopher. That's why Sri Aurobindo says an intellectual knowledge can be completed, learned without any change in our consciousness. In the present mode of consciousness, we can attain this intellectual knowledge. Whereas this integral knowledge must be an experience. It is a becoming, a change of consciousness, a change of being. So this is the difference between the integral knowledge and the intellectual knowledge. So what we understand by these two terms, that means we find a very important character of this integral knowledge, that is its evolutionary character. This evolutionary character of its becoming. That means what? Integral knowledge is evolutionary in its character, whereas intellectual knowledge is non-evolutionary in its character. There is no change of consciousness. Here what happens, without change of our consciousness, without growth in our consciousness, we cannot grow in our integral knowledge. That means what? This our mental ignorance, the stage we are in, is only a stage in our evolution. This is a very important change between intellectual knowledge and integral knowledge. Integral knowledge always associated with the evolution of consciousness. It varies in degrees as per the evolutionary stage. Whereas intellectual knowledge, there is no change in the consciousness. There need not be any change in the present mold of our consciousness. That means what we are given to understand, it is when we say that integral knowledge is evolutionary in its character, it is always subject to evolutionary process. We may think that if it is subject to evolutionary process, then integral knowledge should be very slow, because evolution, as we are given to understand, it's a very slow process. We may think that to attain an integral knowledge, one should undergo the very slow process of evolution. It may take a very long time. But Sri Aurobindo dispels this view. He says that it need not be so. Because so far, why the evolution has taken such a long time? Because it was all along been subconscious. But the moment the mental consciousness has come into play, it has become conscious. The process of evolution has become conscious. So what he says is that the evolution has now become conscious, and its method and steps need not be altogether of the same character as when it was subconscious in its process. So far, it was subconscious. That's why it took a very long time, but now it's become a conscious process. Hence, there need not be a long time for us to acquire this integral knowledge. We can quicken the process of evolution. There is a process by which we can quicken this process. What Sri Aurobindo says is integral knowledge must result from a change of consciousness. We have already seen that there should be a change of consciousness to get this integral knowledge. It's always associated with a change of consciousness. He says the integral knowledge must result from a change of consciousness. When we say there is a change of consciousness, he says it can be gained by a process in which our will and endeavor have a part. That means what? We have a role to play. We need not be a passive spectator in the process of evolution. We can be an active participant. That's what he says. Can be gained by a process in which our will and endeavor have a part. That means what? The growth in us can proceed by a conscious self-transformation. We can all engage in this conscious transformation by which we can quicken this process. So this is a hope Sri Aurobindo is giving to us. Because of that only, Sri Aurobindo and the mother had spent most of their lifetime by their yogic sadhana, by their divine intervention. They could bring down the supramental consciousness in the earth atmosphere so that this process can be quickened. Now, we have seen that what is integral knowledge, what is our intellectual knowledge, what's the character of this integral knowledge. We have seen all the basic concepts. Again, as regards knowledge, Sri Aurobindo talks about fourfold order of knowledge. It's very important. This fourfold order of knowledge is very important if one wants to know what knowledge really is. Thank you. In the Life Divine chapter 10, there's a chapter by name Knowledge by Identity and separative knowledge. This is a basic concept one should understand. Again, it's radically different from what we understand by knowledge. Whatever Sri Aurobindo explains here, it's radically different from what so far we have understood. He says there is a fourfold order of knowledge. The first is the knowledge by identity, what we have marked in blue in the left hand side. First comes the knowledge by identity. He says it's a direct awareness of our own essential existence. Here, the knower and the known are not different. For example, I am aware of my own existence. Nobody need tell me that I exist. Nor do I require a process of knowledge to acquire to know that I exist. I know intrinsically that I exist. That means what? I'm identified with this knowledge. This is called knowledge by identity. This is the highest state of knowledge. This is the first way of knowing in its purest form. Here, the knower and the known are the same. This is where do you find this knowledge? Of course, at an elementary level, we find it in our being. We know our existence. That's all. That too, with regard to our existence. Beyond that, we don't know. We don't know this. We don't have this faculty of with respect to things outside us. Whereas this knowledge by identity is a characteristic phenomenon of the higher divine principles, what Sri Aurobindo calls as the upper hemisphere of the existence, Sat, Chit, Ananda, and Supermind. These are all the four divine principles in the upper existence, upper hemisphere. And all these things are pertaining to the planes. They belong to the plane of the superconscient, Satchitananda and supermind. Here, what the knowledge, the knowledge by identity is a characteristic phenomenon of these levels or these states. This is the highest level of knowledge. Here, there is no difference, there is no segregation between the subject and the object, nor the knower and the known. The second is a derivative knowledge. It's a knowledge by direct contact. Here, what happens? We have a knowledge of something by direct contact, but there is a separation from its source. For example, we have the movement of anger rising in us. We know that we are getting angry. The moment of anger we can understand. We can be aware of that moment. But we are separate. The source is separate. The source of anger is separate from us. So we have a direct contact. And though this knowledge is powerful, but it is incomplete because it has no direct contact. So this is a second level of knowledge by direct contact. Again, this knowledge by direct contact as regards our own self, all our internal movements like anger, pleasure, joy, grief, everything we can know by direct contact. This is found in our subliminal consciousness. Our surface consciousness is whatever is on the upper side of ourselves, outer external self, whereas in our subliminal consciousness, it is a deeper part of ourselves where this knowledge by direct contact is present. Our subliminal, I'll explain this a little more when we come to this part proper. But we can know, as of now, we will know that this knowledge by direct contact is a characteristic phenomenon of our subliminal consciousness. Again, the third is knowledge by separation with direct contact. Sri Aurobindo categorizes as this is a third category. Here, what happens? We are able to observe our inner movements. There is a knowledge by separation with yet with a direct contact. So, for example, I know that the moment of anger is rising within me. At the same time, I can look at my anger. I can look at my anger. If possible, I can even regulate it. So we have that observing capacity of our inner movement. This is because of the knowledge by separation with direct contact. So this is the third level of knowledge. Third level of knowledge is we have a direct contact, yet we can separate ourselves from the object. That is any inner movement. As regards says, it pertains to only inner movements. Then fourth is a separative knowledge. The separative knowledge is that which we all have. A perception of the external world through senses. It's a completely separative knowledge. It relies on the machinery of indirect contact. Dhanasekaran, can you please switch off your screen? It's disturbing. The fourth is a separative, completely separative knowledge. Here we rely on the machinery of indirect contact. We rely on the machinery of indirect contact. It is a knowledge by acquisition. Whatever my senses report, based on that, I gain my knowledge. This is what our knowledge is based on. 99% based on the separative knowledge by a machinery of indirect contact. So whatever knowledge we call it, it is through the fourth category of separative knowledge. Again, now we can go to the various levels of knowledge. We can see now how we will go about is that what is the nature of knowledge in at the surface level? What is the nature of our knowledge at our subliminal level? Next level, subliminal level, what is the nature of our knowledge? What is the nature of our knowledge at the cosmic level, in our cosmic existence? What is the nature of our knowledge? And what is the nature of our knowledge beyond our individual and the cosmos? That is a superconscious stage. Again, at the bottom, what is the nature of our knowledge? Nature of the knowledge at the plane of inconscience. So we will go through everything. We'll have a roundup of everything so that we'll have a complete picture of knowledge at all levels of existence. Now, first let us see. We have seen that we have a separate knowledge. What is the nature? What's our nature of our knowledge of outside world? We think many of us think that we have a complete grip of whatever is going around us. Our world knowledge is thorough, and we are very sure about it. Are we really certain about the knowledge of the external world. Number one, we should know that it's entirely on a separative basis. It's a nature of, by the nature is of an indirect perception based on our sense image. Again, it is coordinated by reason. We get some knowledge about the world around us. But what Sri Aurobindo says, whatever the knowledge of the world we have, it's very narrow and imperfect, and our interpretation of this knowledge is highly doubtful. Again, to fill the incompleteness of a knowledge, we seek the aid of imagination, speculation, reflection, then inference, measurement. Again, we have to resort to the evidence of science. With all this, we build up the knowledge of our external world. Sri Aurobindo says our surface mind has no direct means of knowing the other men, even though they are of our own kind, they are of our own same build of mentality, vitality, and physicality. They are of the same model as ours, but still, we do not know about the people around us. We do not know properly the people around us, the other men around us. Often, Sri Aurobindo says our inferences about other people are often erroneous or erroneous constructions. Our interpretation of the outward signs is a mistaken guesswork, he says. Because of all these limitations, human beings live as strangers to each other. This is the real picture. So, our knowledge about the external world, whatever is outside us, rather, our knowledge about things outside us, other beings, is always subject to error. That's what Sri Aurobindo says, because it's all brought by our senses and they are not infallible. Okay, this is as regards the knowledge of knowledge of the world, knowledge of things outside us. What about the knowledge of our own self? Do we have a complete knowledge of our own self? Sri Aurobindo says our self-knowledge is imperfect. He says it's meager and insufficient. It's on the surface level only. It's mostly related to our external self and nature, and not to a true self and to the true meaning of our existence. This is the status of our knowledge of our own self, which is within us. Now we may ask, why are we ignorant about the things around us? Why are we ignorant? Well, what's the reason for our world ignorance and the self-ignorance? What's the reason for that? And Sri Aurobindo beautifully explains why we lack knowledge about our true self and of the world around us. He says, mostly men live in their surface consciousness. And he says we are sandwiched between the outer cosmos, that's outer world, and the inner infinity, the subliminal selves. The subliminal self is something which is within us. It's an infinite space. So we as human beings, most of us live on our surface self, which is sandwiched between the outer cosmos and the inner infinity, that's our subliminal self. There's a wall between our outer being and the subliminal being, which is constructed specifically for building our own ego. See, nature, first of all, wants to develop our egoistic personality so that one can individualize himself, then he can grow out of itself. So, as a first process, it builds one's ego around one's own self. To facilitate this building of one's own ego, There's a wall between our surface self, our surface egoistic self, and the subliminal being. So in this wall, what happens? It We are shut off purposely from the subliminal by this wall, so that we can concentrate and develop our egoistic individuality. This is a nature's device. This is our inner wall. We have a second wall, Sri Aurobindo says, which is protecting us from the cosmos, because we want to secure our individuality, preserve our individuality against the cosmos surrounding us. In order to do that, there's a second wall which is around us. Just like we are building a fence around a tree, there's a wall protecting us against the cosmos, because there are so many forces which are surrounding us. In order to protect ourselves, there's a second wall built by nature around us. Again, but we can't live in isolation, because we as a human beings, we have to communicate with the world. In order to do that, the nature has provided us these five gates of senses through which we maintain contact with the world. What happens is that these senses not only bring knowledge from the outer world, they also bring in all kinds of forces from the outer world to us. These forces come in through waves and currents and occupy our being every minute, occupy our mind and the body and the vital. They come in all forms, including ailments, illnesses, and diseases. What happens? The wall around us, instead of really protecting us, it is really obscuring our vision as to what is coming to us from the cosmos. We are totally ignorant of what is coming to us from the cosmos. So what happens? On one hand, we are barred from the real knowledge of the subliminal by our inner wall that is separating our surface self from our subliminal being, and there is another wall which is which is supposed to protect us from the cosmos. Again, it's obstructing your view. Because of that, neither do we have a proper knowledge of the world, nor do we have the knowledge of our inner self. This is the reason what Sri Aurobindo says, for lack of knowledge. Then we may ask, is there any better mode than our surface knowledge? There is an, a larger mental being, a larger inner vital being, a larger inner subtle being. That's our subliminal self. In the subliminal self, what happens? We can observe the origin of all our thoughts and feelings, the sources and motive of our action, and whatever energies that are coming, expressing through our external self have their origin there. And whatever our outer activities, they're all conditioned and activated by our subliminal self. Our inspirations, our intuitions, our life motives, our mind's preferences, they're all arising from our subliminal self. What Sri Aurobindo calls it as inner initiating self. So once we enter into our inner subliminal being, we are able to find find the means of distinguishing what is arising from us and what is coming to us from the cosmos. And we are able to perceive the interchanges which is happening between us and the cosmos. We are able to perceive what comes to us from the others and the universal nature. With the result, what happens is that we no longer need to subject ourselves involuntarily to these impacts and interchanges. We can gain the capacity to accept, to reject, defend ourselves, or to isolate. So all these things are possible. All these things are possible once we go deeper inside and live in our subliminal self. It has a capacity, powers for telepathy, clairvoyance, and all the supernormal faculties are possessed by our subliminal being. So this is our better way of gaining knowledge by going deeper within ourselves. We needn't stop with subliminal being alone. There is still a better knowledge than the subliminal knowledge, what Sri Aurobindo calls it as a psychic knowledge. We know that psychic being or psychic element lies deep within ourselves. To reach our psychic being, we have to first go deep into our subliminal parts. That is something below our outer selves. We have an outer mind, vital, outer physical. Inner mind, inner vital, and inner physical, they constitute our subliminal being. Then again, the inmost being is what Sri Aurobindo calls it as a psychic being. Once we try to go deep into our subliminal parts, instead of remaining in our surface parts, once we go deep into our subliminal parts, we'll be able to establish better contact, a lasting contact with our psychic being, psychic element. As of now, psychic being is under the dominance of our mind, life, and vital. No longer it can exercise its influence on our outer instruments, but once we go into a subliminal, what happens is that the psychic being gains power and it can come forward and it can rule our mind, body, and vital. Our psychic being has the spontaneous knowledge which separates the truth from the falsehood, and it can help us towards our integral transformation and integral knowledge. So only when we get to our psychic being, we can attain integral transformation and integral knowledge. So we have gone from surface knowledge to subliminal knowledge to psychic knowledge. We all talk about knowledge. How the process of knowledge, what is the real process behind this knowledge? What we call knowledge is there, what is the real process? Sri Aurobindo says the knowledge of everything is pre-existent in our subliminal consciousness. When we contact something, because already everything is there in our subliminal consciousness, when we contact something, this identity awakens in the self the dormant knowledge of the self outside it. In the contact of existence with existence, this identity awakens in the self the dormant knowledge of the self outside it. That means what? We have the dormant knowledge of everything outside us within our subliminal being. So when we make a contact, what happens is that really this dormant knowledge awakens in us and comes up as a knowledge acquired. We believe that we have acquired this knowledge from outside, but what comes up in the surface mind as the knowledge acquired is already existing at the subliminal level. This is what Sri Aurobindo says. But we fail to realize because of the wall separating our surface mind and the subliminal being. That means what? Knowledge it's not acquired from outside. It's already there dormant inside and it comes up. It's awakened from our subliminal being. This is the real process behind knowledge. And we have seen that our world knowledge is imperfect. It is always subject to errors. How can one get true world knowledge? As of now, all our contact with our world is through indirect means, through our senses. We have to extend our consciousness behind our own body, behind the wall of egoistic consciousness, and we have to inhabit the body of the universe. Our body, our being should become one with the cosmos. Our consciousness should become one with the cosmic consciousness. Only then we can get the knowledge of the external world, he says. For that also he says, only through the subliminal route one can attain the cosmic consciousness, because a subliminal being is surrounded by a sheath. And there is a consciousness surrounding this sheath, he says, what he calls it as a circumconscient. He calls it as a circumconscient envelope. A subliminal being goes on widening this sheath around it, what he calls it as a circumconscient, so that at one point of time it's able to unite with the cosmic being, one with all the existence. Then we attain the cosmic consciousness and we get the complete knowledge. So the root is always a subliminal being. So we have seen that subliminal level, what's our knowledge, and then the cosmic level, what's a nature of knowledge. What is the nature of knowledge of the supreme existence? We have seen that the superconscient, at the Satchitananda and the supermind. Here, it is purely the self-awareness inherent in existence. The knowledge is purely the self-awareness inherent in existence. Here there is no need of knowledge, nor is there any operation of knowledge, because there is knowledge by identity. There is nothing to be known there. There's nothing outside it. Everything is within it. At the level of superconsciousness, there is nothing outside it. So everything is known intrinsically. This is a status of our supreme existence. And not only that, it is a primal all existence. It contains all existences in itself and is contained in all existence. So it is intrinsically aware of all that is in its being. This is a supreme level of knowledge. That's why Sri Aurobindo calls the knowledge of identity belongs to the plane of this upper hemisphere of Satchidananda and Supermind. And from this level, one can ask, see, the divine at the top level is the knowledge of oneness is there, knowledge of identity is there. How it can become, at our level, it has become the separative knowledge. How we can, from the knowledge of identity, how we have slipped down to separative knowledge, one can ask. Sri Aurobindo says, at the initial level, there is a movement which is taking place where the subject draws a little back from itself as object. The divine drawing back itself as an object. So this marks a beginning of what we call knowledge at our separative knowledge at our level. It comes down level by level. It comes down. If you see the right hand side of the diagram, superconscient is there. Next level, there is a level of our superconscient, the Satchidananda and supermind. Next level comes to the level of what Sri Aurobindo calls it overmind cosmic consciousness. So the overmind consciousness, overmind cosmic consciousness, that division is already there at the beginning. Okay. And when it comes to our mind, life, and body, there is a complete separation taking place. So from the level of oneness, knowledge by identity, step by step, the knowledge is coming to the level of separate knowledge. At our level, it becomes a complete separative knowledge. And not only that, when it goes to the inconscient, at the bottommost, because everything is an involution. What Sri Aurobindo says is that divine in its manifestation, from the topmost level to the bottommost material level, there is an involution of consciousness. When it goes to the inconscient, there is also a knowledge. What he says is that what you find in superconscient level, there is a luminous absorption, whereas that is the knowledge is enveloped by light, whereas in the inconscience there is a tenebrous involution in it. That means knowledge is enveloped by darkness. There is knowledge even in the inconscient level of inconscience. But what happens is that it is completely surrounded by darkness. That's why Sri Aurobindo says what you call as a material or inconscient energy, there is a great intelligence behind operation of all material energy, he says. Slowly what happens by the process of evolution, we grow from inconscient to subconscient, rudimentary life beings, and then when it comes to human beings, it becomes a fully developed mental consciousness. So this process is a circle. First, what happens is that involution from the superconscient to the next level, and then next level to our mind, life, and body. Then next to the inconscient. But the evolution process doesn't stop with inconscient. First, involution takes place. That is, a descent takes place. Then the ascent takes place from the level of inconscient, from the plant and minerals, and then animals, then human beings. Then it goes on. This process goes on. That's why Sri Aurobindo says the knowledge, integral knowledge, is a process of evolution, he says. So far we have seen the knowledge, how it operates at various levels. Now, Sri Aurobindo has summed up everything, he says, in seven fold self-revelation. What he calls it as a sevenfold self-revelation. This integral knowledge can be obtained by a sevenfold self-revelation. Number one, we should have the knowledge of the absolute as the origin of all things. That means we should move from the level of self-ignorance to the knowledge of the absolute as the origin of things. We should know that absolute is the origin of everything. This is the knowledge this is the first requirement, he says. That is, we should remove our self-ignorance. Second step, he says, what he says, this is a sevenfold knowledge, he says. Second, he says, we should have the knowledge of the cosmos as a self's becoming. What we think cosmos is a separate entity. We think the universe exists on its own, separately, independently, but it's not true. It is a self's becoming. It is a becoming of the absolute, becoming of the spirit. This knowledge we should have. This is a second knowledge we should possess. Third is that the knowledge of the world, we think it is separate from us. Instead, what we should have is that the knowledge of the world as one with us in the consciousness of a true self. We are divided by our egoistic consciousness. We are limiting, because of this, we are limiting ourselves to our life, mind, and body, and we do not include the world around us. So we should know that the knowledge, the world, we should have the knowledge of the world as one with us in the consciousness of our true selves. So that we become the universal individual. What Sri Aurobindo says is that instead of being an egoistic individual, we should become the universal individual. Fourth is that we should have the knowledge of our psychic entity. What happens is that we live in our time-bound ignorance. We think that our existence is all between our birth and death, nothing more than that. But we have an immortal existence. That immortal existence we can be made aware of that only by the knowledge of our psychic entity, which is immortal. We have an immortal persistence in time beyond death and the earth existence. This knowledge we should have. Next is a knowledge of our greater inner existence, what we have seen, our subliminal self, instead of being what Sri Aurobindo calls it as a psychological ignorance. That is, we live in our superficial stream of our being, which our conscient waking self. Whatever is our conscient waking self, beyond that we don't go. We should have the knowledge of our greater and inner existence, that is so subliminal. This helps us to get away from our psychological ignorance. Next is that our preoccupation with our material existence. What happens? We should have the knowledge that our mind, life, and body, we should have the knowledge of its true relation with the true self within and the superconscient above. We don't know how our mind and life and body are related to the true self within and the superconscient above. What? Our mind and life and body are solely occupied with our material existence. There is a preoccupation of the mental intelligence and powers with the material existence, which this, he says, we should transcend, we should get out of it. Finally, he says, we should know how the true use of our thought, will, and action, and a change of all our nature into a conscious expression of the truth of the spirit. All our thought, will, action, and the nature should be made as a conscious expression of the truth of the spirit. That is the spirit within, the self, the divinity. Only then we can escape from the practical ignorance. So these are all the sevenfold way of knowledge. Sri Aurobindo says, finally, he says the only way we can ask, how are we to get out of our our knowledge to our ignorance to real knowledge? How one can acquire this integral knowledge? Sri Aurobindo gives a solution. The only solution is that what he says is that it's only by an opening to our inner being or entry into it, that direct intimate awareness can be added to the outer indirect awareness. We live in an indirect awareness on our surface self, but we don't have any direct intimate awareness that can be obtained only by our opening into our inner being. This is the only way, he says. It's only by our awakening to our inmost soul or superconscient. By awakening into our subliminal self, we again go deeper into ourselves, to our psychic being, through our superconscious self. Then the beginning of the spiritual knowledge happens with identity as its basis. So this is the only solution Sri Aurobindo says for all of us. So this is in brief. We have seen various modes of knowledge, various levels of knowledge, and how to move from our separative, ignorant knowledge to the step by step we can attain the knowledge, the highest knowledge by identity. That's possible only by our establishing our inner contact with the true self. So this is all about knowledge I would like to share. Now it's open to the forum.
Before we ask any questions, I'm going to play some music just for a little bit of meditation, and then I can open it to questions. First of all, thank you very, very much, Sivakumarji, for taking us through the topic of knowledge in a very systematic way, um, especially with your PowerPoint chart. It was very, very useful, and you divided it into how it relates to ourselves and the cosmic consciousness as well. I do have a couple of questions, and then if others have questions, if you can just raise a hand and then I can mention your name. Can I ask the first question? You started off by talking about intellectual knowledge. Is that necessarily a first step or a necessary step for integral knowledge?
Yes, indeed. What Sri Aurobindo says is that we can widen the horizon of the limits of the knowledge by through intellectual knowledge. We are all with even intellectual knowledge also. The goal is seeking the truth. By it's not for merely acquiring knowledge. It's for as long as it's in the our goal is towards seeking the truth. This intellectual knowledge also will help us. But only thing, it has its own limitations. Unless unless it's accompanied by a change of consciousness, we can't go beyond our intellectual. Intellectual knowledge has a limit. It has a limit, and we can't go beyond that. So it even though it's a beginning, but we can still go beyond that. Never, Sri Aurobindo says that one should abandon one's intellect. That's in fact, human beings. We have got it is a special feature given by nature to human beings is that we have a developed intellect, which animals don't have. So we should make full use of that, but we should go beyond that. One should understand that it has its own limitations.
But does it mean that it is possible to have integral knowledge, which you have explained that Sri Aurobindo has said it's knowledge by experience, which involves a change of consciousness? We can acquire that without going through the process of intellectual knowledge?
Quite possible, because we have seen in our spiritual history many people who may not have developed intellect, but we still find that they have obtained higher realms of knowledge, the knowledge of the divine, the spiritual knowledge. They may look very unintellectual at the outset, but they may have a profound knowledge. So there is the intellectual knowledge is not the precondition for obtaining this integral knowledge. It's not a precondition.
Okay.
In fact, Sri Aurobindo says, when Nirodharan has asked Sri Aurobindo in his correspondence, he says this intellectual knowledge or knowledge by means of regular modes of acquiring knowledge, if had it been set as a precondition for your yogic sadhana, then he says a few could have progressed. That's what Sri Aurobindo says. Even says that when if a BA degree from Calcutta University is set as a precondition for coming to this yoga, then a few could progress, he says. It's not a precondition.
Wonderful. Thank you for that.
But in fact, it helps. What Sri Aurobindo and Mother says is that if intellectuals turning to spirituality will greatly help, but it's not a precondition.
And is it in the same level as then acquiring that experience of integral knowledge through devotion as well as through work and other channels as well? Is it the sort of same, on par with that?
Sure. We can get this integral knowledge. We can see what Sri Aurobindo says is that what is the basic require? What is the precondition for this integral knowledge? Is that this change of consciousness. Once by this change of consciousness, one can get this integral knowledge. The change of consciousness can be brought about by various methods of sadhana, like what you have stated in your bhakti, devotion, work through that. So what is required is a change of consciousness.
Yeah.
That's the catchword here. That's what the catchword here. Knowledge, at integral called knowledge, is always accompanied by should be accompanied by a change of consciousness. See, that's why, for example, one can say, one can have a knowledge of all the shastras. He can be a great Vedic scholar. He can be a great Pandit, but he need not be. He is not said to possess this integral knowledge. He need not have this integral knowledge. He may be a knowledgeable. He may have a knowledge of the intellect, knowledge of all the shastras, but he still may not have this integral knowledge because there may not be any change of consciousness in him. He may be a great Pandit, but if it's not accompanied by a change of consciousness, then he may be a great scholar, that's all, but he may not have this integral knowledge.
Wonderful. Thank you. Another question is, you mentioned that the ego was constructed by nature as a wall, and it's a wall between our subliminal and the outer being. Then you also mentioned that we have another wall that protects us from the cosmos, but also veils the cosmos from us. Is that, what is this one called? This other wall you're talking about? Is that the circumconscient?
Circumconscient is that which is surrounding our subliminal consciousness. Subliminal consciousness has some sort of a sheath around it. What Aurobindo says, subliminal consciousness consists of our inner vital, inner physical, and inner mental. Each has a subtle sheath surrounding it. The subtle subliminal being has the capacity of going beyond this subtle sheath and expand its consciousness. What it calls is at a circumconscient. Circumconscient is that which surrounds our subliminal consciousness. It can go on expanding till it becomes one with the cosmic consciousness. That is different than the one which is surrounding our external consciousness. External consciousness, we are surrounded by a wall which is not circumconscient.
Okay.
It is what he says is that it is a very thick wall. Only we have the gates of our senses through which we are communicating with our world. Otherwise, we are surrounded by that wall. That's not a circumconscient. It's a wall which is separate, which is protecting our external self from the world, from the cosmos.
Has Aurobindo given a name to that?
That's what he has not given any name to that. As far as I know, he has simply stated here there is a wall. That's all.
Okay. There's a question
But
here.
what you say is true. We can have a surrounding and enveloping consciousness around us. It is true. What that is called a circumconscient, that we can get only first through our entering into a subliminal consciousness. By entering into a subliminal consciousness, we can create an envelope of a conscious envelope around us, which we can go on expanding. That is through our subliminal consciousness.
Yeah.
Not through this wall.
Okay. Is that the wall that Mother sometimes talks about, where it's a protection, you say, from the outer sometimes the adverse forces. And she sometimes describes that, if there are certain ways we live, then we create holes in that wall, and forces can enter through it, like diseases or infections and that sort of thing. Is that the same wall that mother is referring to?
Again, what mother there refers is a subtle physical envelope. What Sri Aurobindo, what the mother says is that we have a subtle physical, subtle envelope surrounding our subtle body. Again, subtle what when we talk about subtle body, it always pertains to our subliminal self. It's not pertaining to our outer self. When anything pertains to subtle, it always means our subliminal self. There is a protecting envelope around our subtle body, and when we keep that envelope intact, nothing can pierce through it. When there is a hole or a dent in that envelope, then all kinds of adverse forces like your infections and illnesses can pierce to your subtle body, and then it attacks your physical body, he says. That's not the wall what Sri Aurobindo talks here.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. I have a question here. It says, can you please explain the relationship between the psychic being and the supermind?
Yeah, psychic being, number one, it is something, an evolutionary element in one's own being. It is pertaining to me. Okay, it is pertaining to me. It's undergoing a process of evolution through many of my births, and it finally becomes a full blossomed psychic being in me. It takes several births for one to have a fully blossomed psychic being. It is an evolutionary element within us. Of course, it is always identified with the supreme superconscient. Its identity is always with the divine. But again, it's something an evolutionary part of us. Supermind is not an evolutionary part. Supermind is a part of our Satchidananda. Satchitananda is our the topmost this thing. The supermind is somewhat a delegate of Satchidananda through which creation takes place. Okay? Satchidananda is everything. Satchidananda manifests itself in the world. All the creations are nothing but the expression of Satchidananda, right? But Satchidananda is infinite in its nature. Being infinite in its nature, it cannot make finite things as we find in this universe. What we find in this universe are finite things. So it requires an intermediary principle to create finite things out of infinite, out of an infinite principle. That is what is called supermind. Supermind is a creator. Supermind is a creator which is employed by, which is a part of Satchidananda. On one hand, supermind is associated with the Satchidananda in its infiniteness. On the other hand, it is associated with the lower part of this life, mind, and body in its finiteness. So supermind is different from psychic being. Psychic being is an individual aspect of individual evolutionary aspect in one's own being. Whereas supermind is above that. Supermind is not evolutionary.
Thank you very much. So it's sort of nearing the end of our time, so I don't think there are any other questions. So I just wanted to ask as a final thing, so when you took us through the topic of ignorance a couple of weeks ago, you ended up telling us, what it means to us on a daily basis. What should we be doing? And that's the whole reason for these workshops, is how do we learn from all these themes and topics to change ourselves. And you referred to us to live within was one of the things you mentioned. So am I right in saying that here the message from understanding knowledge is what you said at the end, is to open to the inner being and awaken to the subliminal and superconscient? Is that our
Yes,
personal effort?
yes, yes. The only solution is that to live within. To live within, to by living within, we are moving away from our surface consciousness, from our superficial mind, superficial vital, superficial body, to the surface consciousness, which is centered around our ego, to our subliminal consciousness, which is a greater part of us, and is also which is in close touch with our psychic element, which is again completely identified with the superconscient. That's why Sri Aurobindo gives a solution here. It is only by our awakening to our inmost soul or superconscient self that there can be a beginning of the spiritual knowledge with identity as its basis, its constituent power, its intrinsic substance. So it's only by an opening to our inner being or entry into it that a direct intimate awareness can be added to the outer indirect awareness. He says the only process is that we have to go within, live within. Only then we can bring about the change of our consciousness. By the change of our consciousness, naturally our knowledge also expands. Knowledge more and more, what happens is that the more and more the knowledge begins to reveal itself. As we have seen in the beginning, the knowledge is never acquired from outside. Knowledge is always discovered and revealed by our spiritual endeavor. So that's why he says the knowledge, more and more we go inside, the more and more the knowledge reveals itself. That's the only way, he says.
You just now, I think, might have been reading a line where he's mentioning about opening to the inner being and awakening. Which chapter is that from the Life Divine?
Yes, it is. He's talking about the integral knowledge in book 2, chapter 2.
Book 2, chapter 2.
Book 2, chapter 2. Book 2, I'm sorry, book 2, part 2. Book 2, part 2. Which chapter I've forgotten? He talks about integral knowledge.
Okay.
There he talks about this thing. He is completely dealt as how to gain integral knowledge. He is dealt at length. I'll tell you exactly.
Okay.
This is,
If you
he
can,
says,
let me know.
this is, I think, integral knowledge, reality and the integral knowledge. That's book 2, part 2, the knowledge and the spiritual evolution. Reality, chapter 15, reality and the integral knowledge. Reality and the integral knowledge.
And that line is on page.
I think so. The knowledge line should be there because I've taken out those line and put it in my presentation. I've forgotten from exactly where I have taken this line.
Because for the purpose of this workshop, I think that's the most crucial line. I think that we can.
Yeah, I'll share if you want. I'll share later. Where from exact with reference, I'll share it later.
I'll pass it on to everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll share.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking us through this. It was very, very, as somebody has said, very intense and enlightening talk. It's brought to us a lot of Sri Aurobindo's vast teaching to us. So, and we will definitely come back to you for some more other topics as well from the Life Divine.
Yeah, thank you, thank you very much. Thank you. I'd be only pleased to associate more and more with this group.
Thank you. So I'm going to end now with our final piece of music, and then I wish everybody a lovely rest of Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I thank Sri Aurobindo Center London and also the mother and Sri Aurobindo for having given me this opportunity.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.